We know just how much better the scene can get if we already come in knowing how to play the master as though it's a stage play. So that no one's going to have to Frankenstein 10 people together in edit to get the right music of the scene. If we know what the music of the scene is, then we can fly so much farther, and take so much less time. That's another thing that people don't talk about that often. It's part of my job that I take great pleasure and pride in, to not be a time suck, to show up early or on time, I'm incredibly proud that it takes me less than an hour and a half to get into hair and makeup and that ridiculous costume. It's so many different moving pieces, and as much as I can do to show up, and again, that's just where I'm a structure junkie. If I can structure all the things that I can be precise about, so that there can be freedom within that. That's where I find freedom, is inside of that structure.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Rebecca Wisocky is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process for a role?
Well, I think, especially when the writing is good, I've been very lucky to work with great writers in my life, but I think the voice that was intended, the voice that was intended when the playwright or the screenwriter was writing the character, I look for that. And that, I think that whatever musicality happens to be there, whatever little clues and little nuggets in just the syncopation of that character's voice and how it differs from any other character, and that's the thing that I look for first, is what sense of musicality seems to be there.
And what happens when you're not in tune with that musicality? Do you find like some of it hard to sync up with when you find it?
No, I mean, some of it, some roles have been clearer to me to access, certainly, but there's always some sense of music there. How you're bumping up against the next character, what the game of that scene is, if there's not necessarily an immediate evident musicality in that character's voice, I mean, maybe it is in the manner in which that character is listening, which is not necessarily the way you might listen. But I look for all the ways in which a character is a hypocrite, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
I like, because that just feels incredibly human to me, the ways in which people think things, want things, and believe things, and they betray themselves at many turns. And I find those to be some interesting treasure trove, the ways in which a character can be inconsistent.
I've heard people say like that it's in the lies they're telling that you can see their truth, or something like that. Right?
Oh, that's a good quote. Who said that?
I don't know.
Peter Rinaldi.
I mean, that's right. But that's the interesting part, I guess, where people who aren't so connected to the acting world might not realize that you're kind of trying to find where the character is hidden that's going to lead you to them. I mean, or what the character is hiding that apparently tells you more about them than what they're saying, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and therein lies a journey, hopefully, for a character, or a well-developed character, that they end up realizing what their hypocrisy is, or they never do. I play a lot of villains, and of course, villains never think of themselves as villains. They have perfectly good, for the most part, perfectly good, reasons why they do the things they do. But if there's going to be any kind of growth or change, it's from allowing the audience to kind of be a couple steps ahead of you and to say, God, why did you do that? Or, oh, geez, oh, she's not going to open that door. Or, well, oh, she did it again. Why is she doing this to herself?
Yeah.
I mean, my job is not to, at least this is how I think of it, is not to show you how beautifully I feel about any given thing. It's to allow you to feel for me, or root against me, with any choice I make in, at any given, turn.
And, It's interesting because I was just watching Dopesick last night, and I was seeing
Oh
your
yeah, it's so good,
yeah, it's
right?
so good. But it's interesting because in that first scene that I saw with you, you're the antagonist of the scene in a way, but you're not necessarily a villain, right? I mean, this person is on a journey trying to find truth, and they're bumping up against you, in this way. And I guess I'm just bringing this up because it's interesting how you can really play this in a mustache curling way that's almost caricature-ish, that is going to make me really understand the villainy of this. But if you do that, it kind of breaks out of reality.
Well,
And
it's
it
also
makes
not my job. This is a good
Right.
example because, I'm not a big star. I felt very lucky to have a very small recurring part in this project because I was familiar with the book and certainly with that period in American history and I was a big fan of all of the, major actors involved. And of Danny Strong, and gladly wanted to come and do this. But this woman is really just a functionary. She,
Yeah.
she's a composite based on, a couple real life characters. But in that scene, so I certainly might have the understanding of that woman has a whole universe, right? The character that I play, she has a whole backstory and reason for being, and reason for the ways in which she relates to Rosario Dawson's character. But the scene is not about my character.
Right.
It's not my job to show you all those other things.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's especially with those smaller kind of roles, there's a humility and a restraint that you need to employ because I can't. It's not my job to sell you the entire life of Cynthia McCormick in that moment. But if I feel it and I know it, it'll enrich the thing that Rosario's character is butting up against.
Exactly.
And it won't just be,
Yes.
the brick wall or the mustache twirl. It'll be a real freaking human person, which is what we're obviously endeavoring to conjure.
So that's the real thing that I still can't figure out about what you people do, because in that moment there, in that choice, where you're saying, well, I don't want to overdo this because this scene's not about me, but you also don't want to make it so general that it's not interesting or it doesn't feel like this is a person that has choices they're making that, like you said, nobody thinks they're a villain. Nobody thinks that they are standing in somebody's way on that hero's journey. Like no one thinks of anything like this. How do you, in that moment, especially when you're coming into like a show like this that's already been going a little bit, how do you size up like how you can spread your wings enough to make this a person?
Behavioral specificity. I mean, I'm a structure junkie. I mean, I thought about the way I was going to move that paperclip and close that folder. And I knew that just compositionally, it would cut together really nicely if it just, again, musicality, behavioral specificity. I find freedom in structure and a responsibility to that. And just in terms of just like the workaday life of a journeyman actor and something like that, that's a real hard thing to do, to show up where there's already an established camaraderie amongst people. It's actually a lot easier to be a series regular on a show where it's more your world and your family, and you don't have to deal with any of the social anxiety of like seeing whether or not anyone's going to think you're an asshole on that day, or whether or not anyone's going to like you or be nice to you. I mean, I've been very lucky to. I mean, the Dopesick was a great example. I mean, that was a very warm and welcoming company. Rosario is not only extraordinarily gifted, but incredibly magnanimous and generous. So, that one was very easy.
You've done so many guest star roles. I mean, before we even go into that, because you've done so many of these, you must have this whole audition thing down, right?
I make real specific choices, and I think I make surprising specific choices. And I don't know if there's a secret.
Maybe that is the secret right there, because if you make really specific choices, then that means that it's clear to somebody, okay, not the right person, or definitely the right person.
Or something we hadn't considered. And,
right.
or at least a sense of calm kind of authority of, this is one option of what I might bring to the table. And
But that must be something that you didn't always have, right? This idea of being able to make strong choices.
I think I have a natural hyper-verbal sensibility. It's funny. My mother asked me this just the other day. She said, with genuine curiosity, why do you think, Rebecca, why do you think you're an actor? Like, whatever, because I was raised, my family, there's not a single person that's an artist in my family.
Wow.
And I said, well, I don't actually know exactly. I know that I'm very verbal. I think I might have been a lawyer or a therapist, naturally very, empathic. I would have never been a doctor or a chemist, but I also, I'm adopted, and I think that did a lot to kind of formulate for me this desire to be understood. I think I always felt very early on that I was somewhat kind of alien, and there was no one else really like me. So the desire to see where I fit in and whether or not I could actually really ever be understood was a concept that was deeply fascinating to me from childhood. And also, I was raised by parents who, again, had no background in the arts, but were very funny. And, making my father laugh, to this day, it's just like the most heart-soaring kind of thing that I can do,
Yeah.
And having parents that probably precisely because they adopted me, continue to this day to be curious about who I am, because I am not them,
But that's interesting. Like, I think that's really what every child needs, and it's probably what an actor needs from a director, actually, which is this curiosity of what they got. Like, what do you got? What do you got to give? And and the curiosity of it is nurturing, right? What made you want to go and study it?
I was, so not only did I feel like an alien, I probably look like an alien. I was a foot taller than everybody. The first thing I wanted to be was a runner, because I don't know if I really had that much natural skill for it, but I was so much taller than everyone else. My first sense of identity and that, I have a skill for something, was that I could run really fast. And so that was the first thing that I wanted to be. So along with that, I looked so much older than everyone else. There's a story that is true. I was mistaken for a substitute teacher by other teachers on my first day of 6th grade. Isn't that horrible?
Amazing.
So, and I was very, very shy as a child, very cripplingly shy, and so much so that my mother was concerned that I would be able to, make my way in the world. And so we had this, luckily, our town had this great community theater, and she took me there, and I found this sense of community and this sense of team sport. And I spent my entire childhood there doing that. And also because I looked like I was 40 when I was 11, I had no business playing these roles, but playing some great roles when I was a child. And so anyhow, I've been playing 40 since I was 11. So I have some experience.
That's amazing. And then you went to NYU, and I saw that you studied in the experimental theater wing of.
I went there very specifically to go there.
Interesting.
And I loved that very much, and met two directors, Paul Lazar and Anna B. Parson, who and then joined their dance theater company, Big Dance Theater. To this day, some of the most fulfilling artistic experience of my life, and I just toured as a dancer for a while. So I feel acting wise, I'm rather outside in that sense of what is the physicality, what is the shape, what are the limitations or impediments physically that a character might have. And I feel like that informs me a lot, how they move, where their voice sits, that kind of stuff.
Is there anything else that you can think of that was formed there that you still call upon now?
Spatial relationships. I mean, there was a lot of, viewpoints work and that kind of stuff. I mean, I like a sense of composition. I will always kind of have an eye to, there's something very emotional to me about how the proximity of people in a space, what kind of emotion or story can be conveyed just simply by the shape that you're making standing next to someone. And that's something that came from that training.
Speaking of that, when I saw the trailer for Ghosts, honestly, I thought, is this really what television is coming to? So someone needs to be fired that did that trailer, because when I watched it, which I wouldn't have,
really,
if you weren't coming on the show. So I watched it and became instantly impressed with a bunch of things in this show. Obviously, I've never seen this many people in the frame sometimes.
Yeah, that's remarkable in and of itself. I mean, you never, right. Casts are getting smaller and smaller, and just old-fashioned ensemble work on television, like a true old-school ensemble comedy. I mean, that feels very rare and very special. And luckily, it's a company of people that are all really, really game and skilled enough to keep the ball in the air,
And there's this tone that seems to be very hard to have everyone hitting it equally, because it's the kind of tone, and perhaps that was what my problem was with the trailer. Like, I couldn't get my arms around the tone. But once you watch it, you really appreciate this tone that everybody is on comedically. And you see like the specificity of these characters, which seems very cookie cutter, is actually hilarious and needs to be that way in order to fully enjoy the humor. Like, that's what another appreciation. But I'm just fascinated by being a part of this ensemble, and you coming into this with your character and having to work what seems like almost always with a lot of people. Tell me about that. It seems like if one person is a little bit off, it would kind of ruin things.
It was cast incredibly well.
Yeah.
Liz Barnes and Tanis Vallely cast it incredibly well. I mean, and it's you kind of mentioned this, but each of us represents this kind of archetype of which as you possibly were suggesting you initially thought was a little cheap, but we all are playing this different, very specific song, and also representative of different, archetypical periods in American history that are all incredibly fraught. And put all those people and pack them like sardines into one spot and have them bump up against each other, maintaining their individual voices, yet still creating a universe in which the ultimate goal is for them to bend and change, but still maintaining their own inherent hypocrisy that, which is why they will, hopefully the show will last years and years, because, we will remain in purgatory. So anyway, I find it incredibly fascinating.
Yes.
I love the character I'm playing. I love all of the actors on the show. And,
is it a good working environment? Like, is everyone?
Very, very much so.
Wow.
It truly is a wonderful family environment. And you can't make that up. I mean, the British the version, which I'm a huge fan, and they're producers on our show too, by the way.
Oh, wow.
So we've got big shoes to fill, and, and a great deal of respect for them. But that they're a company of actors that worked as a tight comedic troupe for many years together. So that's something that you can't, fake, and you can't pull out of a hat. But I think we're very lucky in that everyone involved is so well suited to their roles, understands the concept that I just laid out, and happen to all be very generous, kind people.
22 minutes each episode feels like so much is going on, though, and so much humor is going. Like, there's so much comedy that has to happen every minute.
Then they pack a lot in. They pack a lot of story in too.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking, but Is it really just like an instinctual thing when you're doing comedy like this? Or is it, can you tell me any stories about just dealing with this kind of one-liners that have to be baked in to make them not just seem like one-liners? Otherwise, it's not as funny. Like
Right.
you have a very defined character, and the way you're doing this comedy is funny because it's coming from an actual character. You're not just spouting good writing, is what I'm
Right.
saying. And no one seems like they are. That's what's really impressive. When network comedy is impressive, it's when it's done like this,
Mhm.
But I just am fascinated that people are able to do this in the factory of this kind of production. You know what I mean? And here we have like all of these actors doing this kind of work together, almost in the same frame a lot of times, and so
Yeah.
much cutting and so much building of these scenes with all of these lines. Like it just feels like a lot, and so much can go wrong at any moment.
Well, I think things can go wrong when you think too hard about what your own individual thing is. I mean, that's what I mean. And I think I started by saying the musicality of a scene is incredibly important to me. That Ghost is a great example. You can never be consciously, telling or commenting on your own joke. You need to be aware of your own hypocrisy and also leave space and listen well and know what the game of the scene is. There's room for us to improvise a lot in these things. And, it's a cast of improvisers and really deeply, absurdly funny people. We are constantly taking a knee, literally. We're constantly just like breaking and crying with laughter. Very, very funny people. So this group, this Animal House could like go wild and be incredibly funny, but not actually do the job of what the scene is in terms of this tight 22 minutes. So what we always do is get together before, especially with these large group scenes, run them really tight, do like an Italian of the lines, and really identify together what is our job, what is the job of this scene, because any one of us could go off and make, run some aria of clever hilarity, but it's not the job.
Right.
What is the button of the scene? What are we kicking off in the next scene? How is it going to end? What is the musical note that has to take? And what is like the rhythm and the velocity of that scene? What is the game of it? And what is our part? And sometimes my part is really like, sometimes the best thing I can do is just turn and look at the other guy, deadpan. And that's my best moment. And I know what that role is.
Right.
It's just when, anyway, did that articulate?
So this is true ensemble. Like this is ensemble. Like this is when ensemble is great. But I mean, but do you guys do that with the director presence? Are there many different directors? Is that also some kind of a thing to get used to with something like this?
Well, the pilot and the first 4 were directed by Trent O'Donnell, who is magnificent and very funny and understands the syncopation of this world. And he kind of set the tone and the bar. And we knew that no matter what, we wanted to keep up with that game, keep up with that idea. So however, we've also been very lucky that the directors that have come in subsequent to Trent have been in their own way as funny and as gifted. I think the shows have seemed of the same world, which is a credit both to our directors and obviously the writers, and to us as a company to know what it is we're doing and to stay consistent with it.
Are you guys taking the initiative on that rehearsal that you guys do about finding?
That's for us. That's for us.
So that's really cool. That is this true that seems like a typical television type thing?
I think it's unique to this particular project, in my experience at least, that we know just how much better the scene can get if we already come in knowing how to play the master as though it's a stage play. So that no one's going to have to Frankenstein 10 people together in edit to get the right music of the scene. If we know what the music of the scene is, then we can fly so much farther, and take so much less time. That's another thing that people don't talk about that often. It's part of my job that I take great pleasure and pride in, to not be a time suck, to show up early or on time, I'm incredibly proud that it takes me less than an hour and a half to get into hair and makeup and that ridiculous costume, I mean, it's so many different moving pieces, and as much as I can do to show up, and again, that's just where I'm a structure junkie. If I can structure all the things that I can be precise about, so that there can be freedom within that. That's where I find freedom, is inside of that structure.
And so, being an outside in person, as soon as you put that on, does that accent just come right out? I mean, are you just right in there when that costume comes on? Are you just back with her?
Yeah, I kind of think I am. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a great gift to have a costume that literally creates like something of a breath impediment, or, I mean, yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I love it.
Yeah.
I don't like that I don't get to touch props, though, because I love moving furniture and I love props as an actor, but we never get to touch anything.
That's so interesting. That sounds like it's like a nightmare for people that really need to be doing something with their hands in a scene.
Right.
When the horrific accident happened on that Rust production, where that incredible young woman died, I started thinking, like, how could we go on playing pretend? I mean, that went away a couple days later, like that thought, because it's important, and I realize how important it is. It's not just playing pretend, but for a second there, I was thinking, like, how silly it is, what we're trying to do, And I was thinking of actors. I started thinking of actors, though, because, I was starting to see posts online of, like, people I know who were genuinely worried to be working on these sets. Like, I could tell the genuine worry that they have.
Well, here's the thing. There is a lot of trust that goes into doing what we do. Both literally and, figuratively, emotionally, and with literal physical peril. And not just for us, but for all the craftspeople that come together. The hundreds of people that are on that set that people really don't consider are often in very difficult, uncomfortable, dangerous, potentially, positions, which is why there are rules and there are regulations and there are safety protocols, and they should be followed. I was working in Atlanta when Sarah Jones lost her life on that production. So it sounds as though what you're saying is, how do we do something as inconsequential as just tell stories? Well, but that's of course that's what we do. Yeah. Of course that's what we do. That's what we've done from time immemorial. That's how we make sense of tragedy, as we tell stories. That's why what we do is important or significant, even remotely, or worth doing, is in a world of confusion and horribleness and unpredictability and peril, that there are stories and there's ways in which we can seek to be empathetic to other people by seeing their points of view, through experiencing their points of view.
And I guess I wanted to know if, with all of the challenges actors have just to do their work, in general, after this. And again, this is not the first time something like this has happened, but it's fresh now. I'm just wondering if there is a feeling like that people in high places need to start speaking up in big ways after this now, to make at least this one thing not so much of a worry going forward, where you're literally worried about your life. You know what I mean? Like stuff like this, like you were just saying, safety things. And we're learning about a lot of this with the crew, like all these work hours being so long and having to drive home afterwards and getting in crashes because they're falling asleep, stuff like this that we're finally learning about at this time. It almost feels like there's a sea change happening. But does it make you think, like, I wish that my peers would speak up, people in high places that are the above the line people, top of the call sheet, needs to start speaking up now?
I think you're seeing that happening. I think that there was enormous support for IATSE in the last months, as well there should have been, my voice among them. And I think what you're talking about is not just in our profession. I mean, when you say something as grand as people in high places need to start sticking up for the working man. Yeah, I agree across the board.
Is there something that you do when you're not working that kind of feeds your work, that keeps that part of you that you tap into when the cameras are rolling or when you're on a stage or whatever, keeps that alive?
I enjoy research very much. When I say that I find freedom in structure, part of that sense of structure is grounding myself in a sense of place and history and an understanding of the historical relevance of the moment. Dopesick, that was very easy to do, and obviously, and with Ghosts as an example, I did a lot of research about that era and about women in particular in that era. There also is an interesting correlation between the opioid crisis in Dopesick, and also one of the first opioid crises in America happened in that Victorian area, specifically amongst women who were being treated generally for being emotional creatures. And then also the second thing is I'm just a deep animal lover. I have 3 large dogs. And spending time with animals is incredibly grounding to me.
Rebecca Wisocky, thank you so much.
This has been truly enjoyable.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.